Welcome to Villanova in Healthcare, the spring series. It's pretty interesting that we get to do this because it's an opportunity for students to take a look at what people sitting in the same chairs, or maybe not the exact same chairs, were doing years ago, and how they were able to improve their careers and go in interesting directions, sometimes directions you wouldn't expect. They asked me to say a few brief words about my own career and what I've done, and only because it's a little unique in the sense it kind of reflects what this is all about today, that you may start at one point and end up somewhere entirely different. I was a biology English major. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I decided to go to medical school. It seemed like a good opportunity at the time. Went and didn't really fall in love with anything until about my junior year, where I really fell in love with family medicine and knew that I really wanted to be kind of just a community family doctor. And I started off on that path. But I also had this desire to communicate to others through broadcasting. I'd done some basketball announcing while in college and some other things. And one thing led to another, and I was able to get into radio and television. And then in the later part of my career, I continued to do that. And I'll tell you the really interesting story. They said I was chief medical information officer at my hospital. Well, the way I got that job about 6 years ago was I knew how to do PowerPoint presentations and put audio in them, which I didn't even do. And because I was the smartest person in the room, they said, boy, he's really good at technology. That's how I got the job. Little did I know I was getting on a train that was going to rapidly move. Our hospital just put in what is essentially the latest version of Cerner. We went from paper to a full electronic EMR. It's kind of like being beamed up from the 90s to 2017 all at once. And all of the intricate aspects of a major electronic medical record, I get to serve as chief medical information officer and kind of supervise if there's a problem in revenue, if there's a problem in lab, if there's a problem in pathology, if there's a problem on the floor, if doctors can't get things through. I have to run around and try from a medical sense to try to help people out. And it's been a really neat challenge. The reason why I tell you all these things is, think about it. I was a bio-English major. When I got out, there wasn't internet. Computers were these big mainframes that took up an entire building. There was no thought that I would ever be involved in anything like this. And I think that's the exciting part for you, that you're looking at training now and you're preparing yourself and you're sharpening your minds, but who knows where you're going to be. And that's really the highlight of this. What we're going to do today is have different speakers come up and talk to you about their experience at Villanova and how they kind of got into a different direction from where they started, or how they took what they learned and maximized it. Now, I have long bios on everybody, and unlike me, where I got to have the long bio, I'm going to give them short ones. And the reason I'm going to is I want them to spend time talking about their own bio and how they got to where they are. So my first guest is Jeanne Churchill. She has her DNP, her CPNP in 78, a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, and she's a professor of nursing at Columbia University. So, Dr. Churchill.
Good evening, and I'd like to thank everyone for inviting me to be part of this event. So I knew my path when I came here. I really wanted to go into nursing. So I came to Villanova, graduated in 1978. This building wasn't here. It was over in St. Mary's. And your current dean, Dean Fitzpatrick, our senior year, that was her first year at Villanova. When I graduated from Villanova in 78, and back then my name was Neugebauer, my maiden name. So if any of you are from that 40 years ago, we wouldn't know me as Jeanne Churchill. I was Jeanne Neugebauer. I chose to go into pediatrics. Now, back then, you were encouraged to go into med-surg and then pick a specialty. Nobody wanted you to go directly into your specialty. But I had a passion for pediatrics, and I knew that's what I wanted. So I went back to New York and worked at Babies Hospital in New York, which is currently Children's Hospital of New York. And I worked on a pediatric cardiac unit. And at times we have oncology as well as general surgery. And I was there for several years and decided I wanted more than just being a staff nurse. But I didn't want to get away from the patient care. So I didn't want to go into administration. And back then I had read an article about this new role for nurses, nurse practitioners. And when I read it, that was exactly what I wanted to do. I knew that's where I wanted to be. So I applied to Seton Hall University and got in. And back then, there were only 8 people in my program. Now, if any of you know how big the programs are for NPs or even the classes for the schools of nursing, 8 people, that is a real treat to only have 8 people in your program. And we're very lucky because they only accepted as many as they could get National Institute of Health grants for. I was lucky I didn't have to pay for graduate school at all. But I continued working full-time and going to school part-time, and then switched and went to school full-time and working part-time, because back then also the number of hours we needed for nurse practitioners was more than they actually currently need. So when I graduated in 1983 from Seton Hall, I graduated with my master's in nursing in advanced practice in pediatrics. And back then, too, a lot of people didn't know who nurse practitioners were. It was 1983. What's a nurse practitioner? Patients didn't know what nurse practitioners were. Physicians didn't know what nurse practitioners were. But I knew what I wanted to do. So I started going on interviews, and when I would talk to them about what they saw my role as being, it wasn't what I saw my role as being. So I went for an interview down in Newark at Children's Hospital of New Jersey, which is no longer there, with actually no intentions of even thinking about taking this job. And I thought, this is practice. I'm just going to go for a practice interview. In fact, when the physician asked me what my real goal in life was, I said to be a principal dancer in the American Ballet Company, but that's not happening at this point. So when I spoke to him, and he started, first of all, he had already had a nurse practitioner working with him prior to when I had come and interviewed. But when I spoke to him, it was everything I saw myself being. And I was part of a team. It wasn't just myself and a physician. It was a whole team. I was going to see patients inpatient and outpatient. I was going to be part of research. I was going to be part of education. And it was exactly what I wanted. And it actually was my dream job. And that was back in 1983. And he was so progressive in what he saw my role as being. He gave me opportunities I would never have gotten if I hadn't worked at Children's Hospital of New Jersey. So I was there for several years, but as I started to have a family, the demands of the role really became a lot. And it was hard to do both a family and really fulfill my role as a nurse practitioner. So I went per diem, and for years I worked per diem. I did everything. You know, and people would ask me, what is your specialty? Well, besides endocrine, I'd say, you know what? I'm kind of a mutt. I am a little bit of everything. I do cardiology, I've done oncology, I've done surgery, I've done orthopedics, I've done endocrine. So I was able to do per diem because I had all this background. So I did home care, I did teaching, I did inpatient, I did outpatient. And then in 1999, when my youngest was 5, I had seen an ad for an adjunct at Columbia University. And teaching was also something I always wanted, because what I was starting to notice in the clinical arena was that what was happening was we were getting away from the art of nursing. Yeah, we were doing a lot with the science of nursing, but the whole caring end of it and the art of it, I felt that we were getting away from. So I knew that when I was going to teach, I also wanted that to be a focus of my teaching. So I took the job as an adjunct, and after several years was asked to come on full-time. And in their accelerated program, Columbia doesn't have a traditional 4-year program. Columbia only has an accelerated program. And back then, when I entered the program teaching, you got your bachelor's, and now we have an accelerated master's direct entry, which gives nurses their master's in nursing, not as advanced practice nurses, but master's in nursing, because in order to get your advanced practice, you have to get your DMP. So I started there for several years. They asked me then to come on full-time. I taught pediatrics, and then they asked me to become the course director overseeing all of clinical as well as teaching the didactic class. Now, when I was there, I also went back and got my doctorate of nursing practice and graduated in 2010. And I have to say, I knew what I wanted. So my role of what I wanted, how I was going to practice nursing has changed, but I knew that I wanted to be a nurse. And when I had been asked to talk at our high school, they asked, one of the children asked me, so if you could go back to your senior year, what would you do differently with going to college? And I said, nothing. I would be a nurse. I don't have any regrets, and I love my profession. So there's no regrets I have with being a nurse. And I have no regrets coming to Villanova. It did a wonderful job preparing me. And in fact, my daughter also came here, graduated with nursing as well. So it really gave me the foundation I needed to get where I am today. So going back to that concern I had with nurses, losing that caring, losing the humanism, I actually have become very involved, and I started in our curriculum, Reflective Narratives in Nursing Education. And it's been great for the students, it's great for the faculty. And what it does, it brings them back to remembering why they decided to go into this field. Because especially in our accelerated program, the students take 60 credits in a year, and that's tough. And they're so focused on their courses, on their patho-phys, on all their specialty courses, that sometimes they have to step back and remember why they went into it. So it's been a tremendously rewarding experience. I've had the opportunity to lecture on it both nationally and internationally. But if I'd ever change what I'm doing, I would never change what I'm doing. I'd never change where I went. As far as any of you who are here in nursing or going into nursing, as I tell my students all the time, you're never going to regret your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanne. You know, already you're seeing somebody I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I worked my way into medicine. You had your mind made up, but then you had different changes throughout your life, which did that. So I think you're going to see this as a trend, and really important from the Leadership Council standpoint. There will be a chance to talk to all these different people after this is over and ask specific questions if you have any. Our next speaker is Michael Freytag. He graduated in Villanova in 2004 with a BS in finance. He's the managing director of BlackTree Healthcare Consulting. He has some really cool socks on, too. Come on.
That pretty much sums me up. Thanks, Brian, and thanks for the opportunity to speak with you all today. I think my kind of career path echoes a little bit more of some of the uncertainty that Brian had mentioned of his career path, and I'll actually go all the way back to my senior year of high school. When I first got accepted at Villanova, I was accepted as a math major. That day when I applied, I was going to go pre-law, and between that acceptance and actually coming to school, I looked at some of the curriculum and decided that business school, some of the courses that were going to be offered, was of more interest to me. So I changed my thought process already before I even started my freshman year. Once I was here, I think I put off declaring a major as long as possible, going back and forth between actually going and changing my major and going into history and wanted to teach. And after having some good conversations with some of the professors here, my sports history teacher kind of led me into declaring a finance degree, which then led me outside of what I thought I'd be doing of Wall Street or banking, and a passion that I actually loved the classes. I was one of the first class that had a student managed fund here in the business school and was very passionate about those pieces. And my senior year, a lot of my buddies that I'm still very close with today, break my chops that I probably went on about 100 interviews senior year. If I wasn't in a suit one day, it was pretty shocking. So I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I went on interviews just to go on interviews, even though I knew I had no interest in the job, just to meet new people, kind of see what their approach was going to be, what they were doing, and what was out there. And when I first met the healthcare consulting group that I started with right out of school, I actually interviewed with my current partner at BlackTree, also a Villanova alumni, and as we say, sparks flew, emotions ran high, and I decided that that group was who I wanted to work with. And the healthcare side of it at that point really was more of an after effect. It was the idea of consulting, of doing something new, ever-changing engagements. And if you know me or get to know me, I'd pretty much bounce around as much as possible. And the idea of sitting still wasn't something I think I would be too successful at. That's what led me into the consulting piece. So after I accepted the job in a healthcare consulting, which is a pretty vague job title, as some of my friends were asking me, what does that mean? What are you going to be doing? I was like, I have no idea. They said I'll be traveling and doing something different. Sounds interesting. They're like, well, are you nervous about that? I was like, now that you're asking me these questions, maybe I should be, but I wasn't, and started that career path. And 2 weeks into my job, I was working at a hospital in South Philly, and my boss came in and said, what do you think about Minnesota? It was a pretty open-ended question. I was like, I don't know. He said, would you be interested in going to work out there? I was from the thought process that, did I have an option in this? My boss would just tell me what I had to do. So I went to Minnesota, and 2 months later, I'm sitting in a sports bar playing bingo by myself. And I'm like, wow, things have really gone a different direction than I was really planning on. But it was a sports bar, and it was beer, so I was enjoying myself. What was great about that is it created some independence of kind of being out there on the road, kind of fully cutting that umbilical cord from that college nest that you were in to being out there and really having to figure everything out on your own. What a dry cleaner was, those basic pieces that you don't really think about coming out of school. And the experiences when I first started out doing billing and collections, working with insurance companies on the phone, wasn't the most glamorous, but a lot of that first step out of school isn't the most glamorous work. It's learning, it's creating that foundation of where you can springboard to the rest of your career. And those opportunities created, over the 7 years that I was with that group, a lot of unique opportunities. Working in a lot of different states, some places that I never would have gone to, like Mobile, Alabama, and loved it, and other places that I would never want to go back to. So it provided those opportunities to see those, but also provided from a career standpoint where I was able to get involved in, kind of started out, like I said, billing and collections and financial management, kind of starting to serve in more of a management role, and then branch over into operations of healthcare facilities. And the niche that I work in and currently work in now is in the home health and hospice world, which is, providing patient care to families and to patients in their home, kind of outside of that traditional hospital world that, as a finance major coming out of school, was really what I thought all of healthcare was. And those opportunities led me to be more or less a CEO of a home health and hospice agency at the age of 26. And I was in Alabama running a $10 million shop. Those then springboarded me to where I am today. After 7 years with that previous group, myself and my partners that I now work with decided we're going to branch out and kind of go that entrepreneur road of creating our own company. And we started BlackTree coming up on 6 years this summer. And we started out with the 5 of us and no paychecks and trying to figure out, how we were going to move forward with our company and what was this vision. And, we started the company with the idea of providing that perfect care to our clients, to our home health and hospice agencies, but then also to create a company culture that would be unique. A lot of our employees are 22 to 25, and create that culture that would provide them the same opportunities that we had and cut through a lot of that red tape of some of the larger corporations have out there, of being able to make decisions that were going to help impact their careers. And I think that's something that we've been able to do, and probably one of the most exciting pieces that I've had at BlackTree. And we've grown from the 5 of us trying to figure out where that next paycheck was, which I guess the timing of when we started, I had just got married. One of the partners had his first baby 2 weeks into starting. So it was, from a personal timing standpoint, a unique time to kind of go out on our own. But, 6 years later, we have about 100 employees and work in all 50 states with about 260 providers. And I think it's created a lot of opportunities for employees that have come in. And it's been exciting this past year. The first group that came in starting out doing this consulting work with healthcare facilities came in, and we see them go from that kind of deer in the headlights that I knew I was to now being people that are managing large organizations, helping develop the staff that come in that, could potentially be some of you if that's something that is of interest to you. But see them kind of grow and get to that next level it's been pretty exciting to see. What's the most exciting part of healthcare for me is developing these bonds in this, what I would consider a smaller niche in the home health and hospice world, of clients that I think there's some here, I don't know whether or not they're here yet or coming in later today, but they've become almost like an extended family. And with that and with our employees, it's kind of created a unique mix for us, and I think creates a very different career path. Again, looking back to senior year me, high school, or senior year me in college, and where I am now, of kind of those career paths that you don't really think about. If you're in the business school, a lot of what you're looking at is accounting, your finance, your marketing degrees, and kind of maybe more of those typical career paths. And that's why I think I was most excited to be able to speak to all of you today, is to see what else there is out there, and whether or not it's something that just sparks an interest for you to look at other types of careers in the healthcare world outside of what you might be thinking is your career path. And I think, between myself and the other panelists, then we've done our jobs. Again, thank you very much for allowing me to speak with you all, and feel free to stop by afterwards to connect farther. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I think what you see with him, younger member of the panelists, and definitely you guys being even younger, is the ability to move and swing from one thing to another. Because I think your generation in particular is going to have to probably make a lot of moves and be comfortable with moves. And what you really rely on is the ability and the talents and the skills you develop every step of the way. It sounds like he developed something new. He mentioned he learned about different things. That gets you to the point where you can start a company and you can be successful. So I appreciate your comments. Our next speaker is Dr. Robert McNally. He's the president and CEO of GeoVax. But to give you an idea, his background is he's an electrical engineering graduate from Villanova, and he has a PhD in biomedical engineering from Penn, and he has had a career in mixed science and business of over 38 years. So, Dr. McNally.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here and spend some time with you. When you don't get to be my age, I think I'm the oldest one on the panel. Not that I'm proud of it, but you get a lot of forks in the road. And the first fork that I had was right here as an electrical engineering student who decided, this is not what I want to do with my life, but I'm committed to doing electrical engineering, and so I also did pre-med. Now, that's the best way you can destroy your cum, is to do those two majors all at the same time. And so I never got into medical school, but I did get into the Army, and the Army made me a medic. I was a conscientious objector. And so here I am as a medic, and if you've seen Hacksaw Ridge, you know what a battlefield medic is. They put a big red cross on you, and they give you an antenna for a radio. And this is during NOM days, and they give you a little bag of bandages. That's about as far as the healthcare got. There's a little bag of bandages and atropine. It's pretty pitiful, so it gave me time to think about what I'm going to do with myself as I'm going through basic training. And I found out that there's an engineering and research program And there's a woman in the Pentagon who assigns different people with different talents to go out and do research for the military. And I was fortunate enough to land one of those positions at Fort Knox, of all places. We weren't guarding the gold, but I can assure you the gold is there. It's in the middle of a golf course that's there. And we did research for triage for battle wound casualties during the NOM days. The Army, in its benevolence, put me in charge of an operating room. And so it wasn't for humans, but it was for non-human primates, monkeys, and dogs. And we were doing these research programs. And I was fortunate enough to learn some surgical skills that was going to give me an opportunity to do a fork in the road. And so when I finished my Army stint, went to Penn, did my PhD in bioengineering, also doing research involving a certain amount of surgical skills for my PhD program there. But my first job was put in charge of clinical research program for a cardiac pacing company out in Pittsburgh. And so there again, I could use both my electrical engineering and the surgery that I'd learned, put in pacemakers, study the different designs that we were coming out with. And I got so good at this that the people in the marketing department wanted to use me to go out into the field, teach sales folks how to use these newfangled programmable pacemakers. So those of you who are in the medical industry know that when programmable pacemakers first came out, they were pretty complicated, and usually you had to have somebody there to try to program these things. And so I got so good at troubleshooting, I ended up going to Europe with my family. So I spent 4 years in the UK, and I ran European operations, and this is where I got the fork in the road. They told me that not only was I going to be able to go into just about every hospital there was in Europe and try to troubleshoot these pacemakers, but they also wanted me to deal with the sales folks and contracts that had to do with distributors who were doing some of the sales work. And that's the part I hated, because now I'm getting into the business world, and I didn't have any business acumen, and so I felt really out of sorts. But it forced me to learn that part of the business. And it was while I was there that one of our distributors, who happened to be in Switzerland, said, you know, we're going to start a new company. We're going to do a company to do cryopreserved human heart valves for transplant, and we need a token engineer, somebody who can figure this out for us. And so I was it. I volunteered, and I said, sure, I'll do it. Because I was living outside of London at the time, and I knew that they were doing this heart valve work, these allografts, which is brand new technology back in the early 80s. And I went down there, got all their protocols, they handed them to me, said, here you go. And I said, I'm going to the States, we're going to start a company, we're going to do this. We're going to do human heart valves for transplant, never been done in this country before. And so I brought all those protocols back. As an engineer, we studied what we got out of it, and everything about them was wrong. Biomechanics, we were freezing down these heart valves. There's a science to cryopreservation, mind you, okay. But what we found out is that the science that the Brits were using was totally out of sorts, and so we had to totally research that. Company's called CryoLife. We did human heart valves for transplant, veins, arteries for small diameter vascular grafts, all the components of the human knee, and I was fortunate enough to ride that company. We took it on the New York Stock Exchange in the middle of the 90s, and I retired for the first time. And that didn't last long. And I got asked to do some stem cell work and the human cell lines for Abbott. They were making a clot-busting drug called abokinase, and they needed neonatal kidney cells in order to be able to create that enzyme. Those cells actually secreted that enzyme that was used in the OR for years and years and years. Abokinase was the name of the drug. And so we did that for about 8 years, and I just retired a second time. And that didn't last long, because that's where I am now. I'm CEO of a company that's developing, it's a small biotech company in Atlanta. We develop vaccines, and so we license the product from Emory University for an HIV vaccine, which we've been taking through clinical trials now. We're in 15 years of development, and we probably still have another 8 to go before that product will ever make it to commercial market. But we learned that we could not only do an HIV vaccine, we have a Zika vaccine, we got an Ebola vaccine. These are all in the preclinical stage. More recently, got into immuno-oncology, and so this is the really good buzzword now, where you're using the immune system, harnessing the immune system to attack these solid tumors. And so by far, here I am towards probably my last chance to finally retire soon. But it's the hardest thing I've ever done, is doing vaccines. I don't necessarily recommend it for anybody. But when you get up every morning, you think, if I came up with a vaccine that actually worked against HIV, for instance, I could save millions of lives instead of 1 or 2 here and there. And so that's the impetus that gets us going in the morning. So thank you very much for this chance to tell you the truth.
Now, I don't know, it's a long time since I've been in college, but I got a feeling if you're out there, talk to him, because he's retired 3 times. I'm still working, so don't talk to me. Our last guest is Daniel Tropeano. He has a BA in psychology from Villanova. He is the CEO of United Healthcare Services. Another interesting story, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'm going to start at the end and then tell you how I kind of got there. So my job today is I lead United Healthcare's operations for Pennsylvania and Delaware. So my responsibility is everything that we kind of do in the state of Pennsylvania and Delaware, from profit and loss responsibility to sales and marketing to government and regulatory relations to network and provider contracting and relationships to deciding where the Christmas party is going to be at. I do everything in the state. We probably have somewhere around 4,000 employees in the state, about 1,500 that kind of report up through me, through our reporting lines. So how did I get here? I graduated high school and had no clue what I wanted to do. I was the first person from my family to go to college. So the thinking in my family was if you got into college, that's all you needed to do. And then you were going to get a job when you got out and you were going to make a lot of money. So I didn't have a lot of guidance as to what college was and how you did it and, that kind of thing. So I got here and I was in the liberal arts school and didn't know what I wanted to major in or do. So I just took, intro to everything, intro to psych, intro to economics, intro to sociology, intro to political science. And I just happened to like psychology. There was no rhyme or reason to it. I just liked it. It seemed interesting, more interesting than the other things. I was in the liberal arts school, so those are the choices that I had. And for fun, I, decided to minor in English. That was it, right? And so I was going to take those courses. I did okay. I got a 2.9. I got summa cum laude in Smokey Joe's. And so for some of the older people here know, Smokey Joe's was a bar out in Wayne. That was a lot of fun. Graduated in 92, and it was a horrible job market. So went back to the family business, which is working construction. So got a great degree from a great university, and I was working construction. It took me about a year, and then you went to job fairs, right? So there was no internet, no monster.com. So you just go in your suit and pray. So Cigna just happened to be hiring kids out of college to sell these newfangled things called HMOs. This was 1993, 1994. So I was a sales guy, smiling and dialing. I didn't have a computer on my desk. There was a book that I absconded from the library and kind of went through that. And I did well. But along that way, the HMO business at the time was really booming and growing. And I just was able to kind of learn the business. I was able to kind of see the bigger picture and was fortunate enough to have some good mentors and fortunate enough just to kind of land into the right place for me and began to learn the business of health insurance, which then kind of blossomed into health care. So a lot of what we do today is wellness driven and medical management programs and talking to providers and things of that sort, which is much different than what I did when I started, just literally selling $10 copay HMOs. But I grew within the business into various leadership roles and then found myself in various opportunities. So I started out with a company called Oxford Health Plans when it was very tiny, about 100,000 members, and it boomed in 5 or 6 years to about 2.5 million members and was able to learn a lot and grow quickly with that. And then went to a turnaround in New York City with Blue Cross Blue Shield in New York City and learned a ton there. In 6 years, we had turned around the company. We had gone from nonprofit to public, and then were acquired by a bigger company called WellPoint and learned so much along that path about the business. Again, I have no business training. I have no finance training, but I learned finance. I learned business. I have no training around dealing with providers and contracting and relations. And I learned that and was taught that and was able to pick that up as I went along, keeping an open mind, being flexible, being willing, and especially in this industry, to accept and embrace change. And let me tell you something, if there's anything you can learn, change is a great thing. If you can accept it and embrace it, you will do very well in life, because that's the only constant in business, and it's faster now than it's ever been in my career. But if you can accept that and do that. And then fortunately enough, United Healthcare started 10 years ago, decided to open up an operations in Philadelphia, and someone I knew that I had gone to Villanova, and that WellPoint had just acquired the company I was at, and probably wasn't happy with the new leadership, and was given the opportunity to kind of come down here and begin to lead the effort to grow here in Pennsylvania. And then kind of moved into this role now, which is a little bit of all of those things. And I'm going to go back to your point, which you said, I'm not a sit-still person. The greatest thing about my job is 1 minute I'm dealing with an issue on a 3-life group where we sent somebody to the wrong place or we denied a claim, to dealing with the commissioner of insurance for the state of Pennsylvania and the regulators because of some other issue, or going down to Jefferson Hospital to work on our current contract with them that may be up in 6 months. And that diversity is kind of what keep me going every day, and what I deal with every day in terms of it being so diverse from a financial perspective to a wellness and care perspective. Again, I don't think there's any secret to me getting here other than some core basics of work hard, keep an open mind, embrace change, and try to learn as much as you can along the way. And there were a lot of opportunities for me to go back to school, but then wives, houses, children all kind of start, so it gets a little bit more difficult to do that. And I was just fortunate enough to be in places where I was able to kind of pick that up along the way. I wouldn't recommend that. So somebody had said if you could go back and change something, I wouldn't change my job. I would change my major. I probably would have done finance or something like that. But who knows, I may have not been floundering out there like I was at the time to have kind of landed into that. That's probably the only thing I might have changed. But other than that, I love what I do and am very fortunate and happy to have kind of fell into it. So thank you.
Thanks, Dan. So my job is to kind of summarize this. How do you summarize this? What I heard is that you had a lot of people, first of all, who were open to change, who were open to opportunity, who really followed no career path that was set. If you notice, everybody just kind of fell into things, but they fell into things because they were prepared and they learned something. What I heard from everybody is that they never stopped learning, they never stopped seeking opportunity, and most importantly, I get the sense everybody was having fun. I mean, I was joking about, I can't retire. Well, I wouldn't want to retire. I like what I do too much every day. I enjoy going to work, and I think the fact that there is variety and you enjoy what you do makes a big difference. So if you want to be successful, I think the answer is do what you like. Because if you do what you like, you're going to be good at it because you'll enjoy going to work. If you do what you don't like, I mean, you might have to put up with it for some point, or it might be part of your education, it might be something you have to do, but try to move to something you like and you're going to do better. I hope you enjoy the opportunity to talk to these speakers. I hope you had an opportunity just to hear what they had to say. I really appreciate all of you sharing your stories of not only success, but how you got there. I enjoyed finding out the different paths everybody took. So thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you outside.